kick off our time together this weekend. What a joy it is to be here with you guys. I've gotten to know Jamie pretty well, so you guys over at Legacy, y'all are lucky and blessed to have her as y'all's youth pastor. And I hope our students enjoy their youth pastor as well. But honestly, I just want you guys to know that you're here for a purpose, you're here for a reason. And Jamie and I have been praying and walking through this to prepare this weekend for you guys. And so really what our hope is that you would be able to experience Jesus maybe for the first time or in a new and fresh way this weekend, right? And so what that means is that you have to actually prepare yourself to experience what Jesus has for you. And so really tonight, I kind of want to set the stage. I want to set the stage the way you guys can have an amazing, impactful weekend where it's not just like, oh, I did the church thing and like, yeah, that was cool. But the hope and the prayer is that you'll be able to look back months, years from now and look back this weekend as one of your like life posts, one of your signs that pointed you down in your faith journey. All right. And so that's what we're going to do. And really, as we start, I kind of want to give you the scope of the weekend. That way you're not left to like wonder what's going on. All right. So we're going to do sessions just like this a couple times this weekend. So we have the one tonight. We'll have one tomorrow morning done by a different pastor, not me. And then we'll do another one tomorrow night done by a different pastor, not me. And then you'll have either, if you're with Legacy, you'll have your group together on Sunday, or if you're awake, and we'll be back with our church family on Sunday morning. And really, this is just kind of like the beginning, like scratching the surface. The most impactful time for you guys this weekend is going to be when you go back and you have your small group time. And so your small group leaders, we've mentioned them earlier, like your college students, those are your small group leaders. And so hopefully you get a chance this weekend to get to know them. But honestly, you're going to get out what you put in. Right, you're going to get out what you put in. If you just put in a little bit and you just like scratch the surface, like, okay, great, cool, you had a cool weekend, it's fantastic. If you go all in and you get vulnerable in those groups and you talk about real things, you're going to get a whole lot out of this weekend. All right, and so really the ball's in your court. You're going to get out what you put in. And so really tonight, like I said, just the foundation, just the beginning piece of my challenge. I haven't even started my message yet. The challenge for you guys is that you would take that to heart. You're going to get out what you put in. And so my challenge is that you give everything you got for the next couple of days. All right. And then just be surprised when God shows up. It's amazing how that happens. All right. We did have a video that we were going to show, but the Wi-Fi out here is not very good. So Steve, I'm actually going to ask you to like click it. Oh, it's working, but there's no sound. That's okay. Go to the next one. All right. Not a huge deal. What it is it's setting the stage. Okay. And so if you were here with us a couple weeks back, we actually showed that same video, so there you didn't miss anything if you were with us a couple weeks back. Really, it's just setting the stage because we know that in the culture that you walk in, you guys are told that you guys are a lot of things. There's a lot of labels and a lot of titles that are thrown at you, and a lot of those things aren't freeing. A lot of those things actually weigh a lot, right? And so this weekend, our hope is that you begin to unpack what some of those labels that you're wearing, some of those things that you're carrying, and realize that's not the life that God had for you. It's not the intention that God has, not the purpose for your life. And so really that's our hope, is that you can kind of see through the lies, you can kind of see through the fog and begin to actually experience the life that God has for you. All right, so you know what? Let's just dive in. All right. Actually, before I do, let's just go ahead and pray so we can kind of focus and get our hearts right. Dear God, thank you for the space. Thank you for the beautiful chapel. Thank you for the students that are in here. God, we just thank you for even the time that we have to spend together. God, we know that you have predestined us to be here. You knew this wasn't a surprise that we'd be here this weekend. And so, God, we just ask that you move in incredible ways. We love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so this is D Now weekend, but does anybody know what else is happening on Sunday? Anybody? Super Bowl, right? So this is Super Bowl weekend. And so, like, hey, like this is great. D Now is fantastic. There's also something fun happening Sunday night. All right, and why are you talking about Super Bowl? Well, it's actually going to take us to where we're going to start tonight. So if you are like not a football fan and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to talk about football. I'm not, I promise. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about what happens on Super Bowl Sunday. Do you realize that over 113 million people watch the Super Bowl? 113 million watch. They're tuned in. Everybody is looking at the same thing. 113 million people. Right? What happens during Super Bowl Sunday? We get together. We eat wings, we eat pizza, we eat food. Whether you like football or not, you get to go to these parties and have good food and hang out. You're hanging out with your friends. Maybe you go over to your family's house, right? What the Super Bowl does is it draws people together. Even if you don't care anything about the game, there's probably something that you're going to see, whether it's a commercial, whether it's something on social media, whether it's a party you attend, that's going to have to do with something with this game, right? And then if you're a sports guy like me, you watch the game, and then you hear about the game for the next 4 months, all right? They analyze and they talk about all the things that happened in the game for months and months and months until it's like annoying and you've had enough, right? This is what happens with Super Bowl weekend. Big hype. People pay a lot of money. If you don't know, like a crazy amount of money people spend for like a 30-second commercial, it's unreal. People spend a lot of money to be a part of Super Bowl weekend. And honestly, tonight, our story that we're going to pick up in John chapter 8 is actually something is happening pretty similar to the Super Bowl. Now, they weren't playing football, okay? Like they weren't doing that. They didn't come around until way, way later. But they were having this big festival of booths. And I'm not going to tell you all the description about that festival. But what I need you to know is that it's similar to the Super Bowl in the fact that it drew everybody together. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody showed up. Everybody with their friends and their family got together. And they did things similar to a Super Bowl weekend. They ate food. They shared laughs. There were some disagreements, right? Y'all, I know how y'all get during football games, right? There's some disagreements, and they're spending time with family. That's what's happening during this festival of booths. And actually, similar to the Super Bowl, what happened during this festival would also get talked about for weeks and months, similar to the Super Bowl. So we don't know a lot about these festivals, but we do know quite a bit about Super Bowl weekend, okay? And so what I want you to think of is where we're picking this story up. Imagine the hype around a Super Bowl weekend taking place in Jesus' day, okay? So we're in John chapter 8, and tonight I'm only really going to read 2 verses. I'm going to read it several times because it's our theme for the week, and so my hope is that it just gets ingrained in your head and you remember it. And so we're going to be in John chapter 8, verse 31 and 32. And it says this: So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." All right, so what you need to know is that throughout the events surrounding this feast, right, which lasts several days, Jesus had already been teaching and preaching. Like Jesus was already doing his thing. He was teaching and preaching, and he had done so much that there was already people on both sides of the fence about Jesus. Some loved him, some really despised him. Right? Some agree with what he was saying, and others were like, "No way, this dude's tripping." Right? This is what's already happening. This message that he is speaking has already begun to divide the people. Right? And so then Jesus drops this bomb on them in John chapter 8. "If you abide in my word, you're truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So as we dive in tonight, there are some books that are around you. Some of you already grabbed them. If you did, great job. If you didn't, there's some books around you. And what I want you to do is actually want you to take those out. Even if you're not a note taker, I'm going to ask you just to take a couple of notes this week, right? Because you're going to have a lot of stuff. Going through 3 or 4 sessions in a couple of days is a lot of information to take in. And so I'm going to ask you actually just to write a couple of notes down. Nothing crazy. There's no paragraphs getting written here, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be purposeful with what I ask you to write down, okay? And so as we hop in tonight, the first thing I want you to write down is the first truth that Jesus is dropping here tonight, right? Point number 1, the first thing I want you to write down in session 1 is this: to know Jesus is to follow him, right? To know Jesus is to follow him, right? We have it on the screen, so if you can't spell, it's cool. Just copy what's on the screen. To know Jesus is to follow him. All right, we'll leave that up there so you don't have to feel like you're rushing to write that down. To know Jesus is to follow him. Right, so here in verse 31, as we hop in, we have something that's known as an if-then relationship. Now, I don't know how many of you like English. I like to read and stuff, but I'm not really into like all like the grammar stuff of English. So I had to do a little bit of research on what if-then statements are. Right, these are actually called conditional statements. All right, conditional statements. And even if you're not an English buff and you don't really like English, you are very familiar with conditional statements. Let me give you a couple of examples here. If your room is dirty, then you should clean it. That's an if-then statement. If today is Friday, and then tomorrow is Saturday, that's an if-then statement. If you study for your test and you do your homework, you will pass the class. If you want to buy a car, you need to get a job. All right, that's for some parents in the room. They wanted me to say that. They told me to say that for you, okay? Right, we're really comfortable with if then statements, whether we realize it or not. We know what those are. We know what these conditional statements are. And so when Jesus dropped this, that's why it was so offensive, because people knew exactly what he was saying. Right? Here's what he's saying. He's telling all the people, whether you were for him or whether you were against him, that there is a way to have a relationship with God. That you have to realize that people in this time, they all knew about God. Like they knew. Like that was the goal, is to like somehow have a relationship with God. And Jesus is showing up on the scene and he's saying, hey, there is a way to have a relationship with God, and it's me. Jesus is saying, if you abide in my word, then you are my disciples. If you abide in my word, then you're my disciples. There is a condition, abiding in Christ, and there is a result, discipleship. Right? Now, these are very churchy words, so I want to kind of break this down a little bit for you, right? When we hear this idea of a disciple, what that simply means is being committed. Like you are committed to serve what the master is teaching. Right? If you're a Star Wars fan, you're very familiar with this term disciple, because that's what the Jedi's are. They're all like, that's their order. Like they're a disciple of somebody above them and above them and above them, unless you're like Yoda, and I don't know who his leader is, right? Right, if you know Star Wars, then you kind of get this picture. Honestly, if you know like the current phase of like Taylor Swift, you kind of get this picture as well, right? She's got some disciples out there that are all about Taylor Swift, that like listen and do all the things, right? We actually know about disciples pretty well, right? It's this idea that we are committed to that person. We're committed. Day in and day out, we're committed, right? We want to learn from them. We want to do like they do, right? That's what a disciple means. So there's another churchy word that's in here, and it's this word abide. Now, this is one that we don't use very common. And so let's talk about this for a second. All right, this word abide is actually a verb. It's an action word, which means to stay, to remain. Right? The reason it's a verb and an action word is because you have to make the choice to abide. Like abiding doesn't just happen. Like it's not like you're abiding in class, like when you like fall asleep and you're just there. Like, right? That's not abiding. That's falling asleep. Right? Abiding is making the conscious choice to stay and to remain. Let me give you an example, all right, since we're talking about football. How many of you guys in here are Cowboys fans? Cowboys fans. All right, so cool. You don't have to raise your hand very long. I know it's embarrassing. Put your hands down. Okay. If you're a Cowboys fan, right? If you're a Cowboys fan, you have chosen to abide, right? And here's what I mean, right? Every year, there's Cowboys fans that come at me and say, bro, it's our year. It's our year. Every year. Man, it's our year. Right? Listen, guys, listen. I'm 31. It ain't been your year in a long time, so stop saying it, okay? Number one. But two, you're making the choice to abide and be a fan of that team. You have to make the decision. If you're a Cowboys fan, I'm a Bills fan, so I get it too, right? Like, you have to make the conscious choice to abide with that team, right? Because they're obviously disappointing you, right? It takes a pretty good amount of effort to be a fan of a sports team, right? You know, you gotta like, watch the games, you gotta like read up and like learn about the players and like, have the jersey and do all that stuff. Like, it's a conscious choice to abide and be a Cowboys fan. All right. Now, for you that aren't like, sports fans, it's cool. Like, you guys also abide. I know for a fact that you guys have those music artists or those TV shows or those movies that you just constantly like consume, right? Like for me, it's The Office, right? I've seen every episode, but I'm still going to go back and watch it like every night, right? We abide in things. In our culture, we're actually really comfortable with abiding because it's like our comfort. Like, we get like this comfortability with this thing of abiding. We find something we love and we just want to stay there. We choose to stay there. Actually, like the Cowboys fans, you continue to choose to stay there even when it's disappointing, even when it hurts, right? Some of y'all have to hear this too, because it's not just about sports fans. Some of y'all choose to stay with some friendships that also continually hurt and to continually disappoint, but you choose to abide with those friendships, right? We're good with this term, abide. All right, so when you hear this term in Scripture, don't think that it's like some like way outcasted thing. We know what this means, abide. All right, so this is the picture that Jesus is painting, right? We're abiding with him, which means that we stick by him. We're not leaving, right? We are being so close that actually we begin to look like him, right? This is the relationship that Jesus is calling his disciples to have. Like, Jesus is making this pretty awesome claim here, right? He is saying that it is indeed possible to know God. Like, have you ever just thought about that? It's possible to know God, the one who like puts together the human body and the world and the Grand Canyon and all the things that we see that blow our mind. We get the chance to know that God. We get the chance. It's the basis of everything that we know to be true about ourselves and our faith. And here's the great thing about when you abide with Jesus. Unlike anything else you can choose to abide in, Jesus won't let you down. Like, Jesus won't fail you. He hasn't, he won't, and he never will. All right, so we as humans are really comfortable with abiding. Why don't we choose to abide in something that's not going to let us down? So tonight, as we start this conversation about freedom, you're probably thinking, like, hey, I haven't even talked about freedom yet. Well, that's the whole point of the weekend. But we can't really get to the talk about freedom until we get the foundation set. So tonight, we're starting with this statement by Jesus who says, hey, you want to know God, the creator of the universe, the guy who made everything, the king of the world, the one that was at the beginning and will be at the end of all things? You can, and it's through me. All right, that's what he's saying. So point one, hopefully you wrote that down. Let's keep going. Point number two, to know Jesus is to know truth. To know Jesus is to know truth. Again, I'm going to read verses 31 and 32. Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. To know Jesus is to know truth. To know the truth. Not to know a truth, to know the truth. Right? Just a couple of chapters later in the book of John, we have this story of a guy named Thomas. And if you've been around church, you know that he gets the nickname of Doubting Thomas. And his stories like this one that I'm about to kind of summarize for you, that's kind of how he gets his name, right? So Thomas is kind of figuring this faith stuff out, right? He's got these like questions, he's confused, and he wants to know, how, Jesus, how can we continue to abide with you when you've told us that you're leaving? Right? So he takes these thoughts and these questions, and he's asking Jesus like, hey, I want to know the way to get where you're going. Right? Because if I'm told to abide with you, then I kind of have to know where you're going. Right? And then Jesus drops this statement, which I'm sure you have heard before. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There's not much room for like wiggle room here. Like Jesus is saying, this is the truth. Period. End of sentence. This is the truth. The truest truth. The unshakable truth. Now, again, I know sitting in this room tonight that we have a culture around us that tells us a lot of things about truth. Things that I don't even understand how they got to that point. Right? We live in a culture right now that says, hey, truth, that's whatever you want it to be. Like your truth, that's whatever you want it to be, and that's cool for you. Right? I don't understand it, right? But we say these things because really it's a control issue. Like, right, if it's my truth and my truth is real and your truth is whatever you want it to be, then cool, because what that means is that if it's good for me, it's good for me. Which then means, that I don't have to follow some like moral code. Like, I don't have to follow rules. There's nothing that's defined for me. I can live how I want. And here's the thing that really kind of gets you tripped up. There's no consequences because it's my truth. It's my world. And I get to choose how I want to live. Now, we could spend probably an hour talking about this, but really, there's really no like actual, if you think deeply about this, it really kind of falls apart pretty quickly. Right? But here's the scary thing. When I was prepping this sermon, I looked into some research. I really like stats. And so I was looking at some research, and I found this research by Barna, which if you don't know about research, they're like the goats. They do all the research, right? And they surveyed a bunch of teenagers, people like y'all in the room, teenagers. And they asked them, hey, what do you guys believe about moral absolutes? Do you believe that they're unchanging? Or do you believe that moral truth is relative to circumstance? Right? Now, think about this. That's a lot of big words, right? What they're saying is, do you believe that truth is changing based on how life is happening to you, like your circumstances? Or do you believe that truth is truth is truth? Right? Here's the staggering fact. Teenagers in America, people you go to school with, people in this room, like, right? 83% said, no, truth depends on circumstances. 83%. And here's what's wild. Only 6% 6% said that moral truth is absolute truth. 6%. So in a room roughly this size, that's about 3 of y'all. 3 people in the room says, hey, yeah, moral truth, absolute. People don't want to believe in there being an absolute truth because they want control. That's just a fact. People don't want to believe that there's something higher and bigger than them creating these things and holding the truth because they want control. They want to be free from rules. They want to be free from consequences. And they definitely don't want penalties for their actions. If I believe that I can make up my truth system, then whatever I want to do is fair game, right? That's how this works. That means I can satisfy any urge that I have, whether that's physical, sexual, financial, political, whatever. Like whatever I want to do, I can do it because it makes sense to me. And not only does it make sense to me, I have the right to do so because it makes sense to me. That's what culture is telling us, right? They say, I have my truth and you have yours. Like I said, this is a kind of an argument that falls apart pretty quickly once you actually try. But we don't actually like to try because then we're having to say that somebody else's truth might be right. Jesus is saying here, without leaving any doubt, I am the truth. Period. And here's the thing. Some of us like to show up to church and say that we're a Christian, but we like Jesus' truth and then my own truth together. It doesn't work. Jesus is saying, I am the truth. Period. There's no blank there where you can fill in what you want to fill it in with. I am the only truth, and this truth is the only way to have life. That leaves you with a question you have to answer. Do I believe Jesus is saying what Jesus is saying is true? Or did Jesus miss this one and I have it right? Put my money on Jesus, I would. To know Jesus is to know the truth. Right? I want to play a quick game here really quick. I'm going to play a quick game. I'm going to call it The Truest. Not a good title, I get it. All right. And I just kind of want to show you what this looks like. All right. The greatest movie of all time. Don't answer it, okay? Because you'll be wrong. Don't answer it. The greatest movie of all time, Avengers Endgame, okay? Now, you can have some arguments, okay? You can have some, I said, it's my truth, guys. You have to listen, okay? Avengers Endgame is the best movie of all time, right? You can look at the box office. You can look at the culture that it had around it. People still talk about it. People still watch it. Like, it was literally like, I think 13 years in the making, like, greatest movie of all time, had the most like A-list actors in a movie. It was wild, right? Greatest movie of all time, right? Here's some more controversy. Oh my gosh, okay, there it is. Greatest basketball player of all time. Now again, don't answer out loud because you're going to probably answer wrong because you're young and you don't understand what basketball is about. Greatest basketball player of all time was none other than Michael Jordan, okay? And all right, we got some smart people in here, all right? Now, if you disagree with that, it just means you're young, and what that means is that you don't understand history because without Michael Jordan, there'd be no Kobe, there'd be no LeBron, there wouldn't be any of those, okay? So, Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time, all right? Third one. Now, this is where we can have some controversy, okay? The greatest Spider-Man of all time. Now, hold on. The greatest Spider-Man of all time. Go ahead, you can go to the next one. Greatest Spider-Man of all time, okay? Now, some of you in the room are going to say Tom Holland, right? Most of you, wait. Most of you high school girls will say Tom Holland, I get it, okay? Some of you will say Tobey Maguire, and you guys will be right? Tobey Maguire, hands down, best Spider-Man. Now, does that mean he's the best actor? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's the best Spider-Man because without his success, we wouldn't have anything else still going. Right? So he is the best Spider-Man. And also, if you saw like the last movie, he dressed like a youth pastor. So shout out to that guy. He's my favorite. Okay? We can have all of these things, right? We can have all these conversations about the greatest of all time. But here's what I want you to get from this game. When we encounter what we believe to be the best in a certain category, we see that thing in its truest form. Right? You might have missed this. Let me say it again. When we encounter what we believe to be the best in a certain category, we see the thing in its truest form. That's exactly what Jesus says. Colossians 1:15, Colossians 1:19, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. Right? When we read about Jesus in the gospel, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing God himself. Jesus can say that he's the absolute truth, end of story, because he is. God is truth, and Jesus is God. We can confidently follow Jesus as the truth because he is. And we can know Jesus, and knowing Jesus empowers us to be disciples. When you know Jesus and you know truth, this truth isn't like static or flat. It's dynamic and it's life-changing. All right, so I got my last point up here. To know Jesus is to be set free. Here we go. We're finally talking about freedom, okay? To know Jesus is to be set free. Again, I'm going to read you verse 31 and 32. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We have an absolute statement. An absolute statement is made here in these verses. Right? An absolute statement. These are statements that we can't really deny or deflect because they're absolute. Even for us that say that there's no absolute truth, we have absolute statements. Let me give you a couple of examples. A coach comes up to you and he says, "You gave a great effort, but there's no more spots for you on the team." With that truth, there's an absolute truth there. You're not making the team. Your hopes of making the team are done. Here's another one. "It's not you, it's me. I think we're better off as friends." And with that truth, your relationship is over. Some of y'all are going back to the movies by yourself. Here's one that maybe, I hope you haven't heard before, but maybe you have. "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do to stop the cancer." See, these are truth statements, and with that truth statement, you have to begin to prepare yourself for somebody to be gone. See, there are truths that we encounter in our world that do anything but set us free. The great thing about Jesus is he's not that kind of truth. So if you've heard nothing else tonight, I want you to hear this. When Jesus is, what he's saying in these couple of verses is that he is truth. Absolutely. And his truth brings freedom. Let me say that again because that's the foundation of where we're headed this entire weekend. Jesus is truth. Absolutely. And his truth is what brings true freedom. The truth is that Jesus is the Son of God, that he was sent from heaven to earth, and he was sent to live here a perfect life. And he was sent to do that so that we would have a chance to be freed from our chains and our bondage of our own mess-ups, our filth, our sin. He did that for us. And he came and he lived that perfect life. And he did all that so he could take on all of my mess, all of your mess, all of our sin. And he gives us freedom because once we accept him as our Savior, we don't have to live in the fear, the shame, the guilt of what we've done because Jesus already took all of that. We have the chance to know him, to have a relationship with the God of the universe. This is the truth that gives us freedom. This is the truth that breaks down walls that we ourselves have put up. And so really, like I said, the basis of this weekend is that you hopefully get something out of our messages together. But most of what you get out is going to be whenever you get to small groups. All right, and so actually, I'm going to invite our worship team back up. And as they do, I really kind of want to just set the standard for you guys as you guys are going to be doing small groups later on tonight. All right, here's what I want you to talk about. Here's what I want you to start wrapping your mind around. All right, Jesus sets us free from sin. We've talked about that. Jesus sets us free from the pressure that we put on ourselves to measure up to some standard that the world has given us. Jesus is the one who sets us free from stress and anxiety. Jesus is the one who sets us free from the definition around us of what success is.